Houston. We're joined right now, I keep wanting to say in studio, but it's in the old Supreme Court chambers on the Hill with Senator Kathleen Reeby. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Isn't this a beautiful space?
It's so beautiful. It's also very tiny. So I'm wondering right off the bat if we could talk to you about a bill that you're running, and it's called Public Speaking Amendments. But when I read the bill, it's like, oh, I think I know what this is a result of. Do you want to tell our listeners about this bill?
Yeah, when we think about what's happening on our campuses for the last couple of years, there's been some controversy about who can speak and who can't speak. And so this was a bill that I've been thinking about. And then after our tragedy at UVU, I decided to pull the plug and put some guardrails around what was going to happen with public speaking. I think it's a great bill. We have had USHE reach out to me and say that they have a working group that's actually worked on many of these things already. So I'm hoping that that's how bills work, that we don't have to run them because our responsible institutions are doing the work we need that to be done. So really happy to have this bill there and providing some guideline for what I think would be good for our universities, for the safety of our students and the safety of our faculty.
Senator Reeby, I've been looking at the bill, and it's not a creation of a new sort of a law regarding public speaking. It's amendment of current law, isn't it?
Yeah, it would put some guardrails around if someone was going to speak, what kind of things needs to happen. And if you look like a threat assessment, as we started listening to social media or we started seeing stuff that was happening around the campus, we could change the parameters of where the event would happen. I mean, I know we're already doing these things, but just really giving our institutions those guidelines and that support they need to make sure that, we're all on the same page.
So what are some of the guardrails that this bill would put into place for somebody like a Charlie Kirk or, some other well-known figure who's coming to campus?
Honestly, after what happened with Charlie Kirk, I felt a little threatened. I was nervous about my family and myself, and so we kind of had conversations. If you were going to go out in public, what kind of things should you be responsible for as a person who's elected and might be saying inflammatory things at an event? So, making you responsible for your security and not just the institutions. You recognize where you're putting yourself in harm's way, and ensuring your speech and having security for yourself is something that I think is important for the people that come to our campuses. It shouldn't just be left at the doorstep of our learning institutions. I mean, we have tight budgets, and if you're making millions of dollars going around the country speaking, then you should be responsible for some of your security, and you should also have an insurance policy. I think that's my favorite part about it, having insurance so that we're not left holding the bill.
And it also looks, Senator, like the institution that's holding the event can do what you've described as a risk assessment, and so that they can tailor it. It's not just a one-size-fits-all. You get a Charlie Kirk for one thing, but you get Greg Skordas, where three people are going to show up. It's a little bit different audience, you know what I mean? So you do seem to allow the institution to sit down beforehand and say, okay, this is what's going on. How are we going to address the potential problems that we're going to have here?
Yes, I believe idealistically that would be the best way to go, so that you could invite anyone, but then also modify what needed because of their audience. So it does have a risk assessment, and it also moves. So if it changes, you have the ability to change with it, and that's going to be part of a contract, so that you wouldn't have to be saying like, oh, this is where we're at and we're stuck there. You can move along with the as it's migrating through the system.
If you were a student attending a university or some other institution of higher education, what kind of assurances are you hoping to have students feel like by the time this legislative session is over?
It's our First Amendment rights, and I want our students to be exposed to as many ideas as possible. I might not agree with all of them, but I want my son goes to a higher institution here, and I want him to be able to listen to both sides, listen to all sides, learn. I mean, that's how we become critical thinkers, by hearing all sides. So hopefully he would feel comfortable attending those events, and then also that he'd feel comfortable learning from all those institutions, and not even just thinking about, oh, is this safe for me, but actually being willing to engage in these conversations, because that engagement is important.
Yeah. Is there anything in the bill, you mentioned First Amendment, that would tend to allow institutions to regulate speech, or to I know that's a broad question, but it's not a bill designed to affect the speaker as much as it is the institution's ability to control the event and make sure that it's a safe event.
Well, I hope that it actually encourages people to allow more people to come and speak because we have these guardrails around it. So I'm hoping to enhance the First Amendment and trying to bring more people to our campuses, and having this guardrail that you said would fluctuate between the needs of somebody who's really, really out there to someone who's just, standard person who wants to have a good conversation and, a panel.
So that a speaker can feel assured that the institution has taken some steps and worked out some measures to make the event safe for not only them, but for the audience.
Everyone involved, yes.
So, Senator Reeby, you are the Minority Caucus Manager in the Senate, right?
Yes.
Tell me what that does.
Well, we are, what I do a lot of is working with our caucus meetings and trying to keep them on track and on time, getting some people to speak at our caucus meetings. And so if there's something controversial or something that you'd like to speak to us about so that we can help you with move legislation, you could reach out to me and I can put you on our agenda for caucus managing.
Interesting.
Where does this bill sit right now? Because it seems like it would be one that you wouldn't get a lot of pushback from. Maybe you have been, but just reading it, it makes a lot of sense in terms of what's going on right now in our country.
That's a great question. Like I said when we started, the UC board has reached out to me. The Utah State Higher Education Board reached out, and they said, we're actually working on a lot of this. And I have always respected the work that our institutions have done, and if I feel that they have done this to the extent that I would like them to and met all the criteria in my bill, I might just abandon this bill because it's already been done, and they've been working diligently to try to fulfill all these requirements. I mean, everybody wants their students to be safe. Everybody wants to have the latitude to do what's best, but I don't feel like a heavy-handed bill is the way to go, and I feel like the less bills we have up here, the better. So I'm so glad UC's stepping up and doing the work that they needed to do.
And this particular bill, Senator, is directed toward higher education in terms of public speaking events.
Yes.
I have another question for you. This is on your bill about citizen education amendments, and we only have about a minute or so left. Tell us about that one.
That's a great bill. When you think about our students that are 16 and 18, their lives change dramatically. They are involved in very, very adult conversations, adult decisions. They're involved in contracts. So when we look at what's happening in our 16 to 18 lives, we really should tell our students, like, if you sign a contract, you're going to be held responsible. You have to sign up for the draft. You're going to get, if you're going to get a license, you have these requirements, and you can be held accountable for them in law. So, also entering into physical relationships with other people, this would be outlined as well. So just really trying to make students aware of their legal responsibilities as they become emerging and flourishing adults and citizens in our community.
So this would be a class that would be provided?
Not a class.
Okay, not a class.
If we wanted to do it a class, we could. They talked about maybe turning it into a pamphlet, just making it's a shall, a may, not a shall, so it's not required. But it's just kind of like a little nod to, like, let's prepare our kids and not put, potholes in their way for them to crash. So.
My goodness, that makes so much sense to me.
Well, thanks for joining us, Kathleen. Or Senator Reeby.
Senator Reeby.
You're my friend, so I appreciate that.
I'm glad I'm your friend.
We'll bring you back, hopefully, during the session.
I would love that. Thank you so much.
Holly, I've been asked to teach classes around the state on firearms legislation or firearms law because people have just misconceptions or maybe just questions about when, how, and under what circumstances you can carry a gun. And it changes. It's something we do in Utah that because we are part of the old Wild West and we protect our Second Amendment rights, it's very important to us. Restricting gun ownership and gun laws is a big topic, but sometimes things will happen, and we'll have to reevaluate what we're doing.
One of the things that people should note is there are legislators up here that are carrying. I don't know if they're open carrying, but they are carrying. But we have with us today Representative Verona. Is that how you say your first name? Maunga. And one of the things that I know about you, Representative, is that you were close friends with Afa Alu, who was the person who was killed at the No Kings rally in June. And I wonder if you could talk just a little bit about your relationship with Afa and then a little bit about this bill.
Sure. Thank you guys for having me and being here on the first day of session. Afa Alu and I were close friends. We were basically like family, did a lot of work in the community, aligned in so many ways. He was someone who truly supported people and wanting to ensure that communities had the resources they needed and were well taken care of. And so when Afa tragically passed away at the No Kings rally, not only was that devastating, but it was truly a moment of reflection. As a gun owner myself, I had to think about what is my responsibility as a gun owner, and what things can I do as a gun owner to be more responsible, and how do we now look at public safety? Because when you look at rallies and protests and there's hundreds and thousands of people there, someone walking open carrying a long gun, there's going to be emotional reactions to that, and there's fear that comes along with that. And so this legislation really stems from that incident and many incidences like that in our country. And so really what it does is, if there is a crowd of 200 plus or more and it's a rally or a protest within 500 feet, it would make it so that you cannot open carry a long gun. And this bill is very narrow. It makes it so that the first interaction starts with conversation. A police officer would let you know and educate you on this new law. And if after repeated times you choose not to put your long rifle away, then there would be a misdemeanor, a Class B. And so, thinking about this law, you have to be really careful and think about our Constitution and our Second Amendment rights, which are so important. And so within the framing of what can we do and how do we honor the Second Amendment, we came up with this law, looked at legislation in similar states, similar conservative states, and so we created this legislation. And really, at the end of the day, this is about public safety and wanting people to be able to go to rallies and protests and feel safe as a community.
I need to disclose that I represented the man who was carrying the long rifle at that event and caused the consternation or whatever that he was shot himself. And let me ask you this: had this law been in effect at the time of that No Kings rally, and this was it was in June, I think, or it was a while ago, what would have been different? So Arturo Gambo was my client's name. He was carrying the long rifle. He's the one that caused the fear. Would he have not been allowed to bring that into within 500 feet of the event?
Right, within 500 feet of the event. And if it was a situation where he was seen carrying a long rifle, there would have been a conversation with him and law enforcement. And then at that point, it's up to him to conceal it, if he's legally allowed to conceal, or just to make sure you're not within that 500 feet.
Is the conversation with law enforcement as opposed to event organizers? You know what I mean? Because that was a problem too, and maybe you haven't, narrowed it down to that point. But is it law enforcement would come up and say, "Hey, this is a such and such an event. We don't allow long rifles here. You can take that and put it in your car." Is that how the initial interaction would take place?
The initial interaction would take place with law enforcement. I think event organizers also have a responsibility, but that wouldn't be an initial conversation about whether you're allowed to carry or not.
I'm wondering if you could speak to us about another one of your bills that you are particularly interested in carrying this year. Is there one that stands out to you besides this one?
Yeah, I'm running several bills. Many of my bills I look at through the lens of public safety. I have a bill that's coming to the House floor today, actually. This is a victim rights amendment bill, and this just makes it so that it's codified in law that we have a victims' rights coordinator. We have victims' rights advocates who work within our 8 judicial districts. This just makes it so that the process is streamlined and that there is an actual process for people to follow.
So the state would then, as a result of this, have a designated victims' rights coordinator that we don't have now?
We do have one. It's just not codified in law right now. This would ensure that it is there and that there is an actual process for victims if they feel like there is a complaint or an issue that comes up. And so this will just make it so that there's a clear, standardized process.
So just a process question so our listeners understand. This was an interim committee bill, is that correct?
That's correct. It was heard in judiciary, passed unanimously, and so hopefully we'll have some time for it to be heard on the floor today.
So that's why we have a bill that can be right out of the gate.
Yes.
On day one.
Yeah, and so tell us how that goes about. Holly knows how these bills go, but I don't.
Yeah, so we meet once a month during the interim when we're not in our general session. And during the interim, that's an opportunity for the public to come up and for legislators and other organizations to present bills and possible legislation. And this was one that I worked on with CCJS and the Victims Advocates Organization, and was able to work on this and then present it to the Judiciary Committee and get questions asked and have the public come up and comment and speak on it. And because it was passed unanimously, now it goes to the House floor without having a regular committee hearing.
So when you present on the House floor, which whenever that's going to be, which is going to be soon, how much discussion time do you anticipate on a bill like this?
You know, they say if a bill passes in the interim unanimously, then that means it should go right through. But I don't think that always happens. And so I've already had some questions from some of my colleagues about this bill and about victims' rights and if we're expanding things or not. And so this bill is really about policy and not philosophy. And so I'm sure I'll get some questions. We'll have a good discussion about it.
Is the intent to make sure that there's more of a state-wide, or at least that we're consistent with it between jurisdiction and jurisdiction around the state?
Right, and that's one of the things that we're seeing is that it's not consistent. I know that with the 3rd District Court, they have a really great process, and victims feel heard, and there's an opportunity for them to learn about resources. I don't know if it's like that across the board, and again, this would just make it so that there's a clear process for everyone.
And are you working with the Utah Crime Victims Legal Clinic with this, or are they part of it, or do you know?
I haven't worked with them on this.
Okay.
And then the process would be, if this bill passes off the House floor today, it'll go over to the Senate side. Will it also skip committee hearing there since it passed through?
It will.
Okay.
So in the interim, so the Judiciary Committee is made up of House and Senate members. And so that's why it would pass the House Committee and Senate Committee, because it's been heard.
It could be one of the first ones out.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope so, crossing my fingers.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to pay attention to your bills, and we hope we'll have you on the show again.
Good. Well, thanks for having me. It was so nice to be here.
So appreciate it.
Take care.
It's interesting, Holly, that we deal with legislation, and this has been the entirety of my career, and I wouldn't say knee-jerk reaction, but it's a response to something that happens. You can't have another Charlie Kirk. You can't have, at least without taking some steps to prevent it, you can't have another No King shooting without... We know these things are happening now. We know that these things that we would have never imagined 10 years ago are now imaginable. And so it makes sense for the legislature to come in and say, look, this is out there now. This is the way some people are, and this is the way some people act. Maybe these institutions that are putting on these events should take other priorities.
I think, to your point, a lot of the legislation that we see, at least in Utah, is a response to something that happened. So we... in our next segment, we're actually going to talk with Representative Ryan Wilcox, and he is the one behind the bill to have school guardians in our K through 12, right? And that is a response to school shootings across the nation.
Yeah.
So this one, increasing security at rallies, it's a response to what happened at the No Kings rally. And people, as you mentioned, right, were afraid of, in fact, the peacekeeper who is now facing some charges, he was thinking that Arturo was going to fire on the crowd, right? And that caused a response that ended up in a death. So, yeah, I think a lot of the bills that you see, if not all of them, probably not all of them, but almost all of them, are a response to something that happened. Sometimes there's something that where you say, I didn't realize that was against the law, or I didn't realize that was permitted by law, and maybe there's something we need to do to tweak the bill or to tweak a statute, or maybe there's a need for a brand new one.
Yeah, and I think just from a Second Amendment perspective, with respect to the long rifles being brought to an event, it's not a prevention of people carrying firearms to an event. It's just the long rifle, the one that gets the audience more nervous.
Yeah, and we're an open carry state, right? And we know that, and people can carry guns, and this wouldn't even restrict that. It's just a particular type of gun at a particular type of event.
So, just my limited opinion, it wouldn't seem to run afoul of the Second Amendment, although I guess some people might disagree.
Well, there for sure are people who feel like there should be very few restraints, if any, on the Second Amendment.